All right, welcome back to the final installment of the Roaring Twenties, life and politics thereof. Today's lesson will be talking about the political side, the Harding and Coolidge administrations of the early and midpoint of the 1920s, and the hardships and successes thereof. So, first and foremost, we've got to talk about legislation that's passed, the Emergency Quota Act that was passed by Congress, largely because between 1919 and 1921, we saw a 600% increase in the number of immigrants coming into the United States from Southern and Eastern Europe. And when you go back to the isolationists and the nativists, these are the countries that have the most staunch differences from our culture. They're Catholics. They have this is also an area and hotbed for communist, socialist, anarchist theories, and there's a lot of fear that these individuals are going to come and somehow fundamentally change the United States and our culture and our society. So in 1921, Congress will pass the Emergency Quota Act that'll set up a system where there's a maximum number of immigrants allowed in from each country. There is an actual number total for each country, and it's based upon immigrants that were coming in previously. Most of the nations were limited to 150,000 immigrants per year. Japan specifically is excluded from the Emergency Quota Act. The number for Japan is actually set at 0 so that there can be no more immigrants coming into the United States. This is largely because some Americans think that there's too many Japanese immigrants. If we rewind back a chapter or two, we talked about the Gentleman's Agreement, where Japan was trying to monitor the influx of Japanese immigrants, and they were doing so to the best of the agreement. Japan is not very thrilled with the Emergency Quota Act. They feel as though this is a political betrayal, and they will act out in political ways protesting the United States. So this is by no means what causes Pearl Harbor, but it causes a massive deterioration of the diplomatic state and negotiations between the two countries. 29th President of the United States is Warren G. Harding. He is going to be the president the Republicans put forward after Woodrow Wilson's second term in the debate of the Treaty of Versailles. The Republicans go back to an old school, old guard style Republican, really believes in laissez-faire economics, letting the economy go and the government not interfering. And he's not a politician. He actually really has very little regard for the presidency of the in the office thereof in the government. So, as a president, he was not a great individual. His presidential administration is going to be marred right away by the Teapot Dome scandal, which we'll talk about here shortly. He dies in office with stress that is brought on by the scandal and his friends that are involved, and those in his administration. So some pros, some things that he did that were good in his presidency was the Washington Naval Conference. Talk about that next. Kellogg-Briand Pact and the Ford-New Macomber Tariff. The bad thing is called the Ohio Gang. His group, his cabinet members and his friends that he appointed into the government, they're corrupt, and they're called the Ohio Gang. They will be the reason for the Teapot Dome scandal and a lot of the stress that is going into his life as president, and his bureaucratic budget where everything takes forever to get approved. Washington Naval Conference is the first meeting of its kind. We're going to bring in 9 of the most powerful nations, including the United States, Japan, China, France, Britain, Italy, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Portugal. And they are going to jointly disarm. Okay, this was one of Wilson's 14 points, is that armament should be lowered. This Washington Naval Conference says that these 9 countries will equally disarm around the world. The 9 Powers Act will be a smaller part of this that will allow Japan to build up its navy to compete with the decreasing British and American navies present in the Pacific. While this does disarm, it is a major problem because it allows Japan almost unchecked to build up their navy. And when we look, this little foreshadowing here, when we look at why Japan has such a large navy and they're able to rival the United States in the Pacific, one of the reasons is the Nine Powers Treaty that allowed Japan to build up a navy while everybody else was reducing theirs. It was a good thing overall because the militarism and threat of all nations around the world was drastically reduced. The second thing up here is the Kellogg-Briand Pact. There's an agreement between nations not to use war as an international way of resolving a conflict. So we should all sit down and talk. And it was kind of the United States' way of saying we need to have a League of Nations, but not be involved in the League of Nations. Kind of a promise that we will not use war. And anybody that was signed into this agreement was supposed to act if there was an aggressor. It's going to be a colossal failure, but it did get international communities to agree that conflict is not a way to resolve issues. The Ford-Niemecumber tariff was a law that all imported goods into America were raised, and this is meant to protect American businesses, small businesses, industries in the United States, especially as many of the European nations are starting to compete, and they're starting to really hamper a lot of American businesses. Initially, this tariff is really good because we see this huge rise of production and boom in the economy of America. But immediately following, over 4 or 5 years, we see these other countries in Europe, especially, that start to lay tariffs back on the United States. And our industries. For instance, France raises 100% tariff on American automobiles. So if it costs $200 to buy an automobile in the United States, we ship it over there with the tariff, the automobile would cost $200 plus a $200 tariff or $400. And so that's really going to hamper trade. Also, Germany is going to put a 22% tariff on wheat. Spain is going to put a 40% tariff on all American goods. And what this tit for tat tariffing does is it is going to drastically slow the international trade that is already slowing. Following World War I, nobody's trading like they were prior to World War I. And now, because of the long-term effects of the Ford-Niemecumber tariff, there's going to be a drastic slow. We're talking 1925, 1926, drastic slowing of trade between the United States and other nations around the world. And that economic slowing is going to start to show what is going to be the Great Depression in the United States and depressions for other nations as well. Harding's biggest scandal, Harding's biggest issue as office was the scandal over this petroleum base in Wyoming. This area was called Teapot Dome. Very, very rich naval reserve. It was set aside so that the United States should always have oil, especially for our military, in case there was a shortage or people embargoed us. We would have this. It was set aside. It was government property. But the Secretary of Interior, Albert Bacon Fall, leased this out privately. He went around Congress and around all of the bureaucratic checkpoints and leased it out to private industries who used this for profit. And this became investigated by the Senate. And then, of course, it's going to be leaked out. And all of the fallback is going to come back, not on Fall, but it's going to come back largely on Harding himself, because Secretary of the Interior is appointed by the President of the United States. Yes, Fall is going to, he's going to get in trouble for it, and there's going to be major issues. He's going to be the first member of the cabinet to be put in prison while in office, but it all still looks back at Harding. Why did you put this person into this office? He was not a good person. Did you not see that his characteristics were as such? And the Teapot Dome scandal is the scandal in American history prior to Watergate. So if you looked at scandals and scandalous behavior of presidents prior to Nixon's Watergate, this would have been the premier one. So Warren G. Harding is going to take all of this very personally. He's going to be very stressed, and because of that stress, he is going to die of a heart attack or stroke, and his vice president can be forced to step in. And the 30th president of the United States is going to be Calvin Coolidge. He was the vice president. He steps in, and he's known as being cool and collected, a man of integrity. He cleans up corruption and listens for justice in the story and what's going on. He was also known for sitting back and letting both sides present their point, and then coming up with a very concise answer as to what needed to be done. As Calvin Coolidge takes over, American prosperity through the 1920s is going to see a huge rise. The American standard of living is going to double. Okay. And for a lot of people, that's very difficult. What this means is what it costs for you to live, what it costs for you to have a home, what it costs for you to operate an automobile, what it costs for you to cook, the appliances that are in your kitchen that are considered standard, like a refrigerator now. All of these things are considered a standard of living. And it's going to double because of the invention of like said refrigerator. You need to go buy a refrigerator, and that's expensive. You need to go buy a washing machine, and that's expensive. And so for a lot of Americans that didn't see a huge pay raise from 1920 to 1925, to be able to afford these is very, very difficult. And they're going to go to some extremes as to how to keep up with the rising standard of living. America did believe that they were in this era of prosperity and that this prosperity was going to go on forever. For instance, national income. This is for the nation, not for the individual. National income in 1921 was $64 billion. And 8 years later, in 1929, it's $87 billion. So we're making more money. The nation is pulling in more money. The stock market is reaching new heights and new heights and new heights. People are investing in the stock market like never before. But your unskilled labor division, your steel workers, your textile workers, your farmers, they're not going to make much more profit in 1929 than they did in 1921. And that's going to be the big issue, is that your foundation of the economic workforce is not making any more money. So during World War I, many farmers took out huge loans to buy more land, to increase the yield of crops, because there was a high demand for this agricultural production. And because they did that, they knew that they were going to have to pay back these loans, but it looked like life was going to be pretty good for them for the long future. After the war, they still had to pay these loans, but agricultural demand shrunk, and crop prices are going to be falling or bottom out very, very low numbers. And so farmers weren't able to get the money they needed out of their crops. Their mortgages, their loans couldn't be paid. They're now in panic mode. So farmers attempt to make more money by what they know. How do you make more money? You have a higher yield, you make more crops. But they didn't take into effect the law of supply and demand. If there is a high supply and there is a low demand, then your price is going to be low because there's a lot of it. There's not a lot of people that want it. And so to be able to sell it, you're going to have a very low price point. And if you create even more supply and the demand stays low, your price is still going to drop. So farmers are going to suffer these huge losses. Very notable quote, and I can't think off the top of my head who said it right now, is depressions are farm-led and farm-fed. So by the midpoint of the 1920s, we see agricultural leaders who are already starting to feel the effects of this depression, which will end up being the Great Depression. Another major problem, I said that the average person wants to buy a refrigerator and a car and a washing machine, and it's very, very difficult to do so because they don't have the money up front to do it, and they want to still have all of these niceties of life, and so they took out seeming loans. The installment plan is what it was called, that allowed people to buy goods over an extended period of time. They could go in and say, hey, I want that refrigerator. I know it costs $500. I have $100 now, and I'll pay the other $400 in payments over time. The installment plan didn't go through a bank. It went through the individual store, the individual retailer. And so then you'd be paying this refrigerator in $20 installments over the next however long it takes you to pay that off. An automobile, $200, you come in, put $10 down, or $20 down, you pay $20 a month until it's paid off. Sounds really good, but if you take out an installment plan on a refrigerator, and you take out an installment plan on a car, and you take out an installment plan on a dishwasher, and you take out an installment plan on a new stove, okay, all of a sudden you have $20 going to the refrigerator, you have $20 going to the automobile, the washing machine, the stove. You have almost $100 in installment plans. And if you're not making any more money, that extra almost $100 that you're paying a month eats up your disposable income. And so the average person didn't see the long-term effects of that. They only knew that they wanted a stove and all these niceties of life right now. So today we have some things that look very similar to this. The dreaded little plastic card that you can start to get when you're 18 years old. The credit card today, we see something similar to it, to the installment plan in the credit card today, is that you can swipe it and you can get your good now. And then if you don't have the money to pay it up front, then you can pay it off over time with very high interest rates. Don't do that, by the way. If you can avoid ever using a credit card for anything other than emergencies, that'd be my advice to you. And even if you can avoid using it for emergencies, have an emergency fund of cash that's stacked up. That'd be the best advice that I can give you economically for this. In conclusion for the chapter, in conclusion for the lesson, America is very focused on the present. They want things here and now. They want the refrigerator now. They want the car now. They have no concern for the future. They don't think 10 months ahead. What happens if I lose my job? Am I still going to have the money to pay these installments? They don't look to the future and say, am I going to need a savings? Are there going to be any big purchases in the future? Nothing can happen to the economy, right? That's rhetorical. And it's definitely a farce that the economy at some point is going to recede. It doesn't necessarily always have to have a depression, but the economy is going to rescind back a little bit. And that recession that's going to happen, and eventual depression, is going to cost many people their livelihoods. Life seems to be easier and more enjoyable. They have leisure time. You can go out and enjoy time. For many Americans, this is the first era of that. All of these products are within reach for consumers. Yes, you can go buy a refrigerator. Everybody can go buy a refrigerator. For the first time, these niceties, these appliances are available to everybody, although they're very expensive. But they're being mass produced, so everybody's capable of having them. America continues to try to live this lavish lifestyle and to shower themselves with these niceties. And as historians, we all know what's coming. Black Tuesday is coming, and the stock market crash is going to cause massive chaos because of these bullet points. Okay, there's a little warning, although if you're an economist and you look at things today that are similar to the 1920s, you would definitely be able to see the ripples coming. Before the study of economics in the 1920s, we didn't necessarily see this coming, which is why Black Tuesday was so hard. And with that, we are at the end of chapter 5.